The large hall of the Galactic Academy of Xeno Studies buzzed with chatter as students from 17 different star systems settled into their seats. The room itself was a marvel of alien architecture, with walls that shifted colors based on the emotional resonance of the lecture and floating light orbs that adjusted their brightness for each species' visual comfort. Professor Tay stood at the front, his tall, slender frame casting a long shadow across the holographic display behind him. His skin had the typical blue-gray shimmer of the Loraxian people, and he tapped his three-fingered hand against the lectern with obvious irritation. "Silence, please," he said, his translator converting his clicking speech into the standard galactic tongue. "Today's topic is a serious matter of interstellar security." The display behind him changed to show a small blue-green planet. "Earth," he said simply, "home to a species called humans. And the reason for today's lecture on containment. Classifications." A ripple of laughter spread through the room. Containment classifications were rarely issued. Only 6 species in all of recorded galactic history had earned such a designation. In the third row, Dury couldn't contain himself. His mandibles clicked rapidly in the Mantodean expression of amusement, and his compound eyes reflected the light in a kaleidoscope of colors. "Something funny, Student Dury?" Professor Tay asked, his inner eyelids narrowing. Dury straightened all 6 of his limbs in the formal posture of respect, but his voice still carried a hint of mockery. "With all due respect, Professor, humans are known to be slow, weak, and technologically primitive. They haven't even established colonies beyond their own moon. How could they possibly warrant containment?" Several students nodded in agreement. A Vapori in the back row released puffs of amused purple gas. "Professor." Tay's expression remained stern. "The Galactic Council does not issue containment classifications lightly. Humans have been deemed too unpredictable and potentially dangerous for regular contact." "Dangerous?" Dury clicked his mandibles again. "They can barely survive in environments outside their narrow temperature range. Most of us could simply adjust our atmospheric shields and walk safely through their most extreme habitats." "Physical capabilities are not the only measure of danger, Student Dury," Professor Tay replied, but he moved on with the lecture, discussing the technical aspects of the containment protocols established around Earth's solar system. As the professor droned on about monitoring stations and signal interception protocols, Dury passed notes to his friends through their personal datapads. "This is ridiculous," he wrote to Miso, a 4-eyed quantum entity who could split her consciousness between dimensions. "They're treating these humans like they're void krakens." "Maybe they have hidden abilities," Miso replied, though her message carried the emoji indicating skepticism. "I bet it's just old data," Dury wrote back. "Some ancient diplomat got scared, filed a dramatic report, and nobody's bothered to update the classification." By the time the lecture ended, Dury had gathered 4 friends who shared his curiosity and skepticism. Miso, Jin, a silicon-based life form whose body resembled crystalline rock; Ryu, who belonged to a collective consciousness that used individual bodies as temporary vessels; and Siok, whose methane-breathing species had evolved in the gas giants of the Outer Rim. They met at the Academy's common area, their different biological needs accommodated by the adaptable environment. "I've got access to my parent unit's research credentials," Jin said, his crystal body reflecting light across the table. "We could look at the actual records instead of the watered-down stuff they teach first years." "That's against Academy rules," Seok warned, the translator converting his bubbling methane speech. The transparent containment suit he wore to survive in oxygen environments made him look perpetually worried. "We're just doing extra research," Dury countered, his mandibles twitching with excitement. "How else will we become proper xenologists if we don't investigate interesting cases?" Ryu, whose current body was tall and graceful with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors with mood, nodded thoughtfully. "My collective holds memories of early contact protocols. Humans weren't always classified this way. Something changed." "Then it settled," Dury said, his compound eyes gleaming with anticipation. "We'll meet tonight in the unused lab in the East Wing. Jin will bring the access credentials and we'll see what these humans really are." Miso split her consciousness briefly, sending part of herself forward in time to check for immediate consequences. When she returned fully to the present, she smiled. No academic warnings in our immediate future. This should be safe enough. As they left the common area, none of them noticed Professor Tay watching from a distance, his expression unreadable as he observed the 5 students who were about to discover why humans were really kept isolated from galactic society. That night, as the primary moon cast a purple glow through the Academy's crystal dome, 5 students gathered in a small, rarely used laboratory, united by curiosity and a touch of rebellious spirit, completely unaware that their understanding of the universe was about to change forever. The unused laboratory glowed with the soft blue light of Jin's access terminal as the 5 friends gathered around. The room smelled faintly of cleaning solution and the special atmosphere mix that kept the Academy habitable for all species. Outside, the twin moons of Galactus Prime cast long shadows through the tall windows. "Everyone ready?" Jin asked, his crystalline fingers hovering over the terminal's interface. His silicon-based body made tiny clinking sounds as he moved. Duri nodded eagerly, all 6 of his limbs fidgeting with excitement. "Let's see what the big secret is about these humans." Jin pressed his palm against the security scanner. The screen flashed red at first, then green as his parent unit's borrowed credentials bypassed the security protocols. "We're in," he whispered unnecessarily, accessing the Xenobiology Historical Archives. Miso floated closer, her energy-based form glowing slightly brighter with interest. As a luminol, she didn't need a physical chair, instead hovering slightly above the ground. "Search for Earth first. Let's get basic data." The screen filled with information as Jin entered the query. Images of a blue-green planet appeared, along with atmospheric readings, gravity measurements, and biological diversity charts. "That can't be right," Sung said, his voice carrying the slight echo common to hive mind fragments. "Check those gravity readings again." Jin tapped the screen. "It's correct. Earth has 1.0 G-force. That's much higher than standard." Siok bubbled nervously inside his containment suit. "Most civilized worlds are 0.3 to 0.5 G. How do humans even move around?" "Look at these temperature variations," Duri said, pointing with 2 of his upper limbs. "Some regions go from below freezing to over 30 degrees in a single planetary rotation." The friends fell silent as they scrolled through more data. The picture forming of Earth was not what they had expected. 21% oxygen atmosphere, Miso read aloud. "That's within combustion range. They live in an environment where fire can start naturally." Jin expanded the biological section. "The predator-to-prey ratio is off the charts. There are thousands of species that could kill a human. So they evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme temperatures, surrounded by predators, in an atmosphere that can spontaneously ignite." Duri summarized, his mandibles clicking more slowly now. That's the definition of a death world." "Keep going," Sung urged, his normally calm hive mind voice tinged with growing interest. Jin navigated to the evolutionary history section. The screen filled with images showing human development, from early primates to modern humans. "They're persistence predators," Siok noted, pointing at a particular section. "They can't run as fast as their prey, but they can run longer. They literally chase animals until they collapse from exhaustion. That explains this physical adaptation," Miso said, highlighting another entry. "Efficient cooling through sweat. Most species either evolved in stable temperatures or have limited exertion capacity. Humans can maintain moderate exertion for hours." Duri was no longer laughing. "So they evolved as hunters who never give up, in an environment that's trying to kill them constantly." Jin opened another file labeled Technological Development Timeline. The room grew quieter as they scrolled through the information. "This can't be right," Sung finally said. "According to this, they went from basic agriculture to spaceflight in less than 10,000 years. Most species take at least 50,000 years to make that transition," Miso confirmed. "The evolutionary pressure on Earth must have accelerated their development." Jin clicked another file, this one showing human medical data. "Look at this. They can heal from injuries that would kill most of us. Broken bones, deep tissue damage, even limited radiation exposure." Because they had to, Duri realized, in an environment that hostile quick healing would be selected for. Siok bubbled anxiously. There's more. Their psychology section is massive. The screen shifted to show complex neurological patterns. They're pack-bonded, Sung observed, like many social species, but they also show strong territorial behavior. That's an unusual combination. It gets stranger, Jin said, scrolling further. They form emotional attachments to members of other species. That's not unusual, Dury argued. Many species keep companions. Not like this, Jin countered. They don't just domesticate animals for food or work. They form genuine emotional bonds with creatures they know can never fully understand them. They mourn when these creatures die. The room fell silent again as they continued reading. Here's something really odd, Miso said after a while. Their art and entertainment. A huge percentage of it involves imagining threats and then overcoming them. They create fictional dangers for fun, Seok asked, confusion evident in his bubbling voice. Not just that, Miso continued. They specifically enjoy stories where they're the underdogs, facing impossible odds. Dury's compound eyes reflected the screen in hundreds of tiny facets. A species that evolved on a death world, surrounded by threats, who chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion, who enjoy imagining even worse scenarios for entertainment, and who developed advanced technology at 5 times the normal rate, Jin added. A new voice made them all jump. Now you're beginning to understand. They turned to find Professor Tay standing in the doorway, his blue-gray skin almost silver in the moonlight streaming through the windows. Professor, Dury exclaimed. We were just... Professor Tay held up a 3-fingered hand. I know exactly what you're doing, Student Dury, and it's time you learned the real reason humans are under a containment classification. He walked to the terminal and entered a high-level access code. What you've found so far is concerning enough. But it's not the whole story. The professor's inner eyelids narrowed slightly. The real reason comes from the only official contact between the Confederation and humanity. A new file appeared on the screen, labeled simply, First Contact Incident. Professor Tay's 3-fingered hand hovered over the terminal. The file, marked First Contact Incident, pulsed with a red warning symbol. What I'm about to show you is classified at the highest level, Professor Tay said, his voice more serious than they had ever heard it. This footage is shown only to senior officials and military strategists in the Confederation. Then why show us? Dury asked, his earlier mockery completely gone. Professor Tay's inner eyelids blinked slowly. Because sometimes young minds need to understand why certain rules exist. He tapped the file. And because I was there. The screen flickered and then filled with footage from what appeared to be a body-mounted camera. The timestamp in the corner showed a date 47 standard years earlier. This was the first and only official diplomatic mission to Earth, Professor Tay explained. I was a junior cultural liaison. The footage showed a sleek Confederation ship landing in a clearing surrounded by tall green plants. Trees, Dury remembered. They were called. A delegation of 6 different alien species emerged from the ship, Professor Tay among them looking much younger. We chose a remote location to avoid mass panic, the professor narrated. The humans sent a small welcome party, of diplomats and security personnel. On screen, a group of humans approached. They walked tall and confident, despite being dwarfed by some of the alien delegates. Their faces showed a mixture of awe and caution. The initial meeting went well, Professor Tay continued. We exchanged greetings, explained our peaceful intentions. The humans were cautious but welcoming. The footage showed handshakes, careful conversation through translation devices, even some laughter. The human diplomats wore formal attire, dark suits with small decorative fabric pieces around their necks. What went wrong? Miso asked, her energy form pulsing with anticipation. Professor Tay pointed at the screen. Watch. One of the Confederation delegates, a large reptilian Draxian, moved suddenly toward a human diplomat, extending a ceremonial gift, a standard crystalline peace offering. The human security personnel reacted instantly, misinterpreting the movement as aggression. What happened next made all 5 students gasp. The human security team moved with shocking speed, placing themselves between the diplomats and the aliens. One drew a primitive projectile weapon. A Confederation security officer, A massive Krell with armored skin responded by activating an energy shield. A misunderstanding, Professor Tay said quietly. The human thought the Draxian was attacking. The Krell thought the human was threatening the delegation. On screen, chaos erupted. A human fired their weapon. The Krell charged. Within seconds, what had been a peaceful first contact turned into a brutal skirmish. Dury watched in horror as humans, despite their smaller size and primitive weapons, fought with terrifying efficiency. They moved with purpose, communicating through short phrases, adapting instantly to the threats posed by species they had never encountered before. They had no advanced weapons, Jin whispered, his crystalline body clicking softly in distress. But look how they fight. The footage showed a human security officer empty his weapon into a charging Krell, calculate the ineffectiveness in a split second, then change tactics and use the environment instead, toppling a heavy equipment crate onto the alien's legs. Adaptability in combat, Sung noted, the hive mind's voice unnaturally still. They assess, adjust, and execute without hesitation. But what happened next silenced everyone. As quickly as the fighting had started, it stopped. The human commander shouted an order, "Cease fire! Cease fire!" And every human instantly obeyed, even those with tactical advantages. The footage continued, showing the aftermath. Several aliens and humans lay wounded. The Confederation delegates expected the worst. In most conflicts, wounded enemies were either captured or finished off. Instead, the humans did something incomprehensible. "They're helping the wounded Krell," Seok bubbled in disbelief. On screen, human medics rushed forward, applying emergency treatment to injured Confederation members, the same aliens who had been trying to kill them moments before. One human was shown applying pressure to a Draxian's wound while shouting for medical supplies. "I don't understand," Dury said, his compound eyes fixed on the screen. "They switch from combat to medical aid in seconds. How can they compartmentalize like that?" The footage continued, showing humans working frantically to stabilize alien physiology they had never encountered before. One human could be heard shouting, "I don't care what color their blood is, they're bleeding out. Find something that works." "This contradicts everything we know about conflict behavior," Sung said, the hive mind clearly struggling with the concept. "Species either fight or flee. They don't fight and then immediately provide aid to enemies." Professor Tay nodded. "This cognitive dissonance is unique to humans. They can view you as an enemy to be eliminated one moment and a patient to be saved the next. No other known species can make that mental transition so completely and so quickly." The footage showed the Confederation members retreating to their ship, carrying their wounded, helped by the very humans who had just been fighting them. Before the door closed, the camera caught a final image. A human medic passing medical supplies to a Confederation doctor, showing them how to use it on the injured Krell. The Draxian ambassador died despite human medical efforts, Professor Tay said quietly. When the humans learned this, they transmitted message after message of regret and offers for diplomatic resolution. But the Confederation had already made its decision. The screen changed to show the official report. Species, human. Recommendation, immediate containment, pending further study. Threat assessment, unpredictable, extreme. The laboratory fell silent. The 5 students who had begun the night mocking the containment of humans now sat in stunned contemplation. Finally, Dury spoke, his mandibles barely moving. "They're not contained because they're dangerous in the traditional sense." "No," Professor Tay agreed. "They're contained because they operate outside our understanding of sentient behavior. A species that can switch from efficient killing to compassionate healing in moments cannot be predicted by standard diplomatic protocols." Jin gestured at the screen with a crystalline hand. "There's more to this file." Professor Tay nodded. "Yes, after this incident, the Confederation began secret monitoring of Earth communications. What they found was even more disturbing than the combat footage." He opened another file labeled Human Entertainment Analysis. The screen filled with images and videos, thousands of intercepted human entertainment broadcasts organized by category. Professor Tay stepped back, allowing the students to explore the files themselves. "These are unaltered," he said. "The Confederation has been monitoring human broadcasts since first contact. Jury selected a category labeled Action Entertainment. The screen immediately displayed scenes from human films, showing elaborate combat, explosions, and what appeared to be simulated warfare. They create entertainment centered around conflict, Miso observed, her energy form pulsing with confusion. Many species have combat simulations for training, Sung countered. This could be educational. Jin shook his crystalline head. Look at the audience data. These aren't training videos, they're mass entertainment. Billions of humans watch these for pleasure. They watched in silence as humans in the videos engaged in elaborately choreographed violence. The detail was disturbing. Impact wounds, tactical maneuvers, emotional responses to injury. Switch to another category, Seok suggested, bubbling nervously in his containment suit. Jury selected drama. The screen changed to show quieter scenes, humans in emotional conversations, expressing complex feelings, comforting one another through difficulties. The contrast is incredible, Jury said. In one type of entertainment, they celebrate combat prowess. In another, they explore emotional vulnerabilities in depth. It gets stranger, Professor Tay said, selecting another file. This one is called Hospital Drama, a popular entertainment format. The screen showed humans in medical settings working frantically to save patients. The students watched as human doctors in the drama fought against time, using every skill and tool available, expressing profound emotional distress when they failed to save a life. They create entertainment about saving lives, Jin said, just like they create entertainment about taking lives. Not just any lives, Miso pointed out. Look, many of these stories involve saving enemies, strangers, even members of outgroups they're in conflict with. Something was forming in Jury's mind, a pattern he couldn't quite articulate. His compound eyes focused intently on the screen as Professor Tay opened more files. Human music showing incredible emotional range, human literature exploring complex moral questions, human sports demonstrating both fierce competition and strict ethical boundaries. I think I understand now, Jury said slowly. Their evolutionary path required both aspects to survive. The others turned to him as he continued, his mandibles moving thoughtfully. They evolved as pack hunters, yes? Not like solitary predators, but not like pure herd prey species either. They had to be both, aggressive enough to hunt dangerous prey, but cooperative enough to work as a unit. Professor Tay nodded, encouraging him to continue. So they developed dual instincts, Jury said. The predator instinct to pursue, to fight, to dominate, and simultaneously the pack instinct to protect, to nurture, to heal their own. But that doesn't explain why they would help wounded enemies, Seok said. Sung's hive mind voice took on a contemplative quality. Unless their pack. Definition is flexible. What if humans can mentally include former enemies in their pack almost instantly? The room fell silent as the implication sank in. That's exactly right, Professor Tay confirmed. Humans can cognitively reclassify another as one of us more rapidly than any known species. Once that mental shift occurs, they're protective. Instincts activate just as strongly as their aggressive ones did moments before. Jin pulled up more files, this time historical records from Earth. Look at their warfare history. They fight brutally, then rebuild their enemies' civilizations. They can transition from total war to humanitarian aid in days. No wonder the Confederation contained them, Miso said, her energy form dimming slightly. How do you negotiate with a species that can see you as both enemy and family depending on context? Professor Tay nodded gravely. Now you understand why the mockery in my classroom upset me. Humans aren't contained because they're weak or primitive. They're contained because they represent an evolutionary path no other species has taken, one that makes them unpredictable by our standards. Jury navigated to another file, this one showing humans in extreme environments, climbing frozen mountains, diving into deep oceans, even early attempts at space exploration. They seek out danger, he observed. They voluntarily put themselves in life-threatening situations, for discovery, for pleasure, for challenge, Professor Tay corrected. Their death world origins mean they evolved to overcome obstacles. When their environment doesn't provide enough challenges, they create them. Sung's hive-mind consciousness seemed particularly troubled. My collective has encountered thousands of species across multiple galaxies. None combine aggression and altruism this way. Their entire history is a contradiction, Jin said, displaying a timeline of human development. Look, they create weapons of mass destruction, then establish elaborate rules about when they can be used. They develop medical technology primarily through warfare. They cause extinctions of other species while going to extraordinary lengths to preserve others. Dury zoomed in on a particular section of human history. These world wars, they nearly destroyed themselves, then created global cooperation systems immediately after. And that, Professor Tay said, is the real reason for containment. Not fear of human aggression alone, but fear of their unpredictability. Seok bubbled thoughtfully. If they joined the Confederation, they would change it forever. Precisely, Professor Tay agreed. Imagine humans in Confederation diplomacy. Their approach to conflict resolution is entirely different from our gradual consensus model. They might propose solutions no other species would consider. Or imagine them in Confederation emergency response, Miso added. They'd take risks no rational species would approve. Dury was still processing everything they'd seen. So the containment isn't just about protecting the Confederation from humans. It's about protecting the Confederation from change, Professor Tay confirmed. Humans would not simply join our galactic society, they would transform it, intentionally, or not. The professor closed the files and looked at each student in turn. Now you understand why I teach this subject with such seriousness. The human containment question may be the most important diplomatic issue of the next century. What happens when their technology advances enough that they can break containment on their own? Jin asked. Professor Tay's expression became solemn. That is the question that keeps Confederation leaders awake at night. Current estimates give us less than 50 years before humans develop FTL travel independently. Dury looked back at the screen, now showing only the Confederation emblem. His earlier mockery felt not just misplaced, but embarrassingly naive. We should tell others, he said finally. The Academy should know the truth about humans. To their surprise, Professor Tay nodded. I agree. The policy of limited information has only created misconceptions. Perhaps it's time for a more informed approach. The professor straightened to his full height, looking suddenly more like a senior diplomat than a classroom teacher. How would you five feel about presenting your findings to the entire Xenology department? The main lecture hall of the Galactic Academy was filled to capacity. Students from every department, not just Xenology, packed the tiered seating. Even some faculty members stood along the walls, unable to find seats. The usual academic chatter fell to a hushed silence as Dean Nari stepped onto the central platform. Today's special presentation comes at the recommendation of Professor Tay, the Dean announced, her gelatinous form shimmering under the lights. The subject matter has been cleared by the Confederation Academic Council, though I'm told it challenges some commonly held assumptions. She gestured toward the side entrance where Dury and his friends waited nervously. I present to you 5 first-year students who have conducted independent research on a containment classification species. As they walked onto the platform, Dury felt hundreds of eyes, optical sensors and sensory organs focus on them. His mandibles clicked anxiously. Just 3 days ago, he had laughed at the very idea of human containment. Now he was about to explain why it was more necessary than anyone realized. Miso floated forward first, her energy form pulsing with a calm blue light. Thank you for coming. We began this research project out of skepticism. We're here to share our findings out of concern. The large display behind them activated, showing the Earth as seen from space. This is Earth, Dury said, stepping forward, home to a species called humans. Many of you know them only as a primitive, contained species. What you likely don't know is why they're really contained. Jin tapped the controls, changing the display to show Earth's environmental data. Humans evolved on what classification standards define as a death world. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, atmospheric oxygen within combustion range, and an unusually high predator-to-prey ratio. Murmurs spread through the audience. A Vapori professor near the front released shocked orange puffs. Most Importantly, Sung continued, the hive mind's voice projecting clearly, these conditions created evolutionary pressures unlike those faced by any Confederation species. The display changed to show human skeletal and muscular systems. Humans evolved as persistence predators, Siok explained from within his containment suit. They aren't the strongest or fastest species, but they can maintain moderate exertion for incredible periods. On their world, they hunted by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. The audience stirred uncomfortably. The hunting strategy sounded almost cruel to species that had evolved as ambush predators or grazers. But the key to understanding humans isn't their physical evolution, Dury said. It's their psychological evolution. The display shifted to show brain scans and neural pathway mappings. Humans evolved both predatory and cooperative instincts simultaneously, Miso explained. As pack hunters, they needed to be aggressive enough to bring down dangerous prey, yet cooperative enough to function as a unit. This created something unique, Jin added, a species capable of switching from aggression to altruism almost instantaneously, even toward the same target. The hall grew quieter as Sung stepped forward. The Confederation has always classified species along established evolutionary lines, the hive mind fragment said. Predator species tend toward hierarchical territorial societies. Prey species tend toward consensus-based, safety-oriented societies. Humans don't fit either pattern. With Professor Tay's authorization code, they displayed footage from the first contact incident. The audience watched in stunned silence as humans fought with brutal efficiency, then immediately provided medical aid to their wounded enemies. This behavior violates our understanding of conflict resolution, Dury explained. No other known species transitions from combat to care this rapidly. A senior student stood up. But surely this is just an anomaly. A tactical decision by their leaders, Dury shook his head. We thought so too. Then we examined their entertainment, their history, their cultural development. The display changed to show a montage of human behavior. Soldiers in combat zones stopping to help injured civilians, sports competitors helping fallen opponents, historical enemies becoming allies within a single generation. Humans routinely demonstrate this cognitive flexibility, Miso said. They can reclassify other as us more quickly than any known species. Once that mental shift occurs, protective instincts activate as strongly as aggressive ones. Their entire history shows this pattern, Jin continued, displaying a timeline of human development. They wage devastating wars, then rebuild their enemies' societies. They create weapons of unimaginable destruction, then establish complex rules about when they can be used. They simultaneously develop technologies to kill and to heal with equal passion. The hall remained silent now, every being present trying to comprehend this evolutionary contradiction. Humans aren't contained because they're dangerous in the traditional sense, Dury explained. They're contained because they operate outside our understanding of sentient behavior. Seok stepped forward, his containment suit gleaming under the lights. Consider the diplomatic implications. How do you negotiate with a species that can view you as both enemy and friend, depending on context? How do you establish protocols with beings whose decision-making doesn't follow established evolutionary patterns? The Dean herself raised a pseudopod. If what you're saying is true, why has the Confederation maintained the fiction that humans are primitive? Why not simply explain the true reason for containment? It was Professor Tay who answered, stepping onto the platform to join his students. Because, Dean Nari, the truth is more concerning than fiction, he said. Telling member worlds that humans are primitive and potentially violent is simpler than explaining that they represent a fundamental challenge to our understanding of sentient development. He gestured to the display, now showing Earth's rapidly advancing technology. Current estimates give us less than 50 standard years before humans develop FTL capabilities independently, Professor Tay continued. When that happens, containment becomes impossible. The implications settled over the room like a heavy fog. Are you suggesting that the Confederation is unprepared for human contact? Asked a faculty member from the diplomatic corps. Professor Tay's inner eyelids blinked slowly. I am suggesting that preparation is finally underway. With his highest security clearance, he accessed one final file. The display showed a Confederation facility labeled Human Integration Planning Commission. For the past 10 years, the Confederation has been secretly preparing for eventual contact, Professor Tay revealed. Not because we want it, but because it is inevitable. Humans will reach the stars with or without our permission. The audience erupted in questions and exclamations. The Dean tried to restore order, her gelatinous form pulsing with the effort. When the noise finally subsided, a small voice asked the question everyone was thinking. Are they a threat to us? Dury looked out at the concerned faces and realized how much his own perspective had changed. The answer wasn't simple. Humans are not a threat in the way we usually define it, he said carefully. They don't want conquest or destruction, but they will change us just by being who they are. Their approach to problems, to ethics, to exploration, it's fundamentally different from ours. Miso's energy form pulsed gently. They seek out challenges, where we avoid them. They embrace risk where we calculate it. They forge emotional connections where we maintain rational distance. And most importantly, Sung added, they don't see these traits as contradictions. To humans, being both warrior and healer, both explorer and preserver, both individual and community, these are natural states of being. Professor Tay stepped forward one last time. The question is not whether humans are ready to join galactic society. The question is whether galactic society is ready for humans. As the presentation ended, and the audience filed out in thoughtful silence, Dury remained on the platform, looking at the final image on the display. Earth, small and blue in the vastness of space, home to a species that had evolved along a path no other had taken. He understood now why the Confederation had contained them. Not out of fear or superiority, but out of a recognition that when humans finally reached the stars, nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again.